Okay, welcome. So we're now into chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, but I wanted to remind you all of the context of where we are. The Bhagavad Gita has three major stages, three major phases in the development of the individual towards the universal and then back as the individual. So these three major stages are reflected in the 18 chapters of the Gita. The first 6 being focused on what we all are familiar with in terms of the spiritual path. Basically, the first 6 chapters include almost everything that we have studied and read in almost all traditions in terms of the individual coming to a state of what you would say individual liberation. In this case, the liberation from being a person to being consciousness. This comes, when it comes, it's not necessarily integrated, nor does it include the universal aspects of the creation. But many, many people are very fulfilled to just complete these first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. In these first 6 chapters are basic lessons that will occur in all the rest of the journey. What you learn in these 6 chapters are foundational in terms of the transformation and transcendence process that the Gita is pointing to, the Bhagavad Gita, as do all teachings. So let's review this first part of the Bhagavad Gita. We just completed the yoga of dejection. So the dejection is the experience of your bondage, not knowing that's what you're experiencing. It's when the being comes forward, where the outer personality doesn't know what's happening. So let's talk a little bit about the outer personality. We are so locked in to our outer personality. Don't fool yourself. We might live in our thoughts and our ideas and our stories and our daydreams and our imaginings, but every piece of those and our memories and our musings, every one of them come as their basis from the impressions gathered through the outer sensory world, which is possible through a body and its 5 senses. So if it wasn't for your body and the mind that makes sense of the senses, you wouldn't have had a daydream. You wouldn't have a story. You wouldn't have a belief structure. All you have to do is sit in an isolation tank for a few hours and stay in a state of sensory deprivation, and you begin to recognize how accustomed we are to live in this state of continuous stimulation, outer stimulation. Our personality is formed through this process of an interaction between our consciousness and the outer world through the body. This becomes the only reality the embodied consciousness knows. It doesn't know anything else. It may know a higher thought versus a lower thought, or a higher feeling versus a lower feeling. It may know pain versus pleasure, or comfortable versus uncomfortable, but that's all within the sensory structure that is the foundation of our personality, our sense of separate self. This identification is very entrenched, in my experience, here in the West. In other places of the world, it's not as entrenched. Consciousness was allowed to come forward more. I feel it's probably because our education system puts such an emphasis on our mental development, and we have spent so many years of our life training our minds as a means of navigating through this outer and inner world, trying to come to some happy sense of self, some harmony, some balance. So it's become a cage that we were born into, and that you don't even know you're in the cage because you don't know something else. And I use the analogy of a fish in water. The fish is, someone asks the fish, well, how's the water? And of course the fish says, water? What water? So how are you doing? Well, it's kind of the same thing. We're living inside of this fishbowl that's full of this accumulated impressions from this interaction of the vehicle, our body, and the outer world. These accumulated impressions go on even when we shut our eyes and go to sleep. They're sitting there, and they'll come and be part of our waking process as dream. So it is a huge content. Subtle and outer physical, not just our outer personality and our outer relationship with the world, but everything we think and muse, contemplate, analyze, is all due to this gathering of impressions. So to wake up means at first that it's just that in your fishbowl turbulence is occurring that doesn't seem to have an outward source. It's arising from something you don't know. In the analogy of the fishbowl, somebody's doing this with your fishbowl. And suddenly, all the things that were all together and in order are starting to stir, and you don't know what's going on. So, dejection is an emerging of consciousness from this complete bodily identification. And it's not known at first. Many people are in dejection and not know they're in dejection, or they're in dejection at times through their many lifetimes, not knowing that dejection is what they're experiencing. They think it's just a bad mood, a bad day. That's pretty much how dejection shows up, because you can't keep the harmony with your outer personality that you have developed. There's a disturbance, and you don't know why, and you don't know how to fix it, and the old things don't seem to work. That's the clue. In my experience, dejection is much more pervasive than people realize, and on the spiritual path, it's your constant companion. It's coming and going. This sense of dissatisfaction that's not really due to an outward cause. This endless sense that something is missing, that's not due to desire. It's coming from an emerging out of a slumberous condition. So when we finish the end of chapter 1, what we saw was Arjuna was in this rigorous process of trying to reestablish his equilibrium, because his fishbowl had been stirred, and he was trying to make it stop stirring in the ways that he was used to. So he rationalized and justified, because what he thought was the stirring was what was before him, this battle. And all his personal qualities were being activated, and the possibility of the loss of all his attachments and his beliefs and his moralities and his ideas. So he came forward and said, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to try to put it all back in the box. Now, Arjuna didn't know he was doing that. He didn't have a clue. At the end of the first chapter, he is still in dejection. He's having the symptoms might quiet, the burning of his skin, his weakness, the inability to hold the sword to fight, the tiredness, the fatigue, the inability to be comfortable or to rest or to find some place of peace. Those symptoms may quiet. So he came up with this, what the mind will do, a rationalization and justification to find the cause. What is the problem? You go to a psychiatrist, you'll go to a doctor, you'll go to a counselor, and they'll tell you what to do, and then you'll do those things hoping it puts it back in the box. And sometimes this works. That's the bitch of the thing. A spiritual awakening occurs, you didn't even know. All you thought it was a bad month. This would not be anything an ordinary ego would seek. Let's be clear. No ego would seek what you find on the spiritual path. Be clear about that. The ego gets tricked and fooled. It thinks the spiritual path is about something it wants. So it collaborates until a higher state of dejection comes and it realizes it's been tricked. It's been losing all along. So the yoga of dejection is a means to union. So the yoga of dejection is a means to the truth of who you are. every time we live in this outer personality, we're not realizing that this outer personality came with an expiration date. Right? Every time when they signed a certificate, you didn't see the duplicate underneath. That was the death certificate. So they're signed at the same time. Your birth certificate and your death certificate are concurrent. The only thing that's not filled in is the date. Who knows, on some plane, the date's probably also there. So this is the untruth of this deal. The untruth is, no matter what body you got, it's going to get old and die. It's going to get sick, it's going to get disease, it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have all kinds of things going wrong. And before it's over, you're going to wish you'd never had one. So when you get this, you get, well, then what is this? What is it we're trying to find out? Well, we're trying to find out what is real, what lasts, what is it that lives this life, what is it that has a body. Now you can understand this intellectually as I am speaking to you, and that is the beginning of the second chapter. The second chapter is a beginning of a description of what it is you truly are and the correct relationship with that. In such a way that it becomes real for you, or begins to become real for you. It is really beginning to understand, like the fish who's been taken out of the water, to understand what it is experiencing when it's out of the water. It's a momentary, periodic, occasional recognition or revelation of what it is other than what it is when it's in the water. So this discrimination is actually a tangible experiencing in the mental or the vital or the physical plane of your true nature. But you don't know that's what it is at first, so it takes time. It's like you have to teach the outer personality in the same way it was programmed to be an outer personality. It has to be programmed to recognize itself as truth, as consciousness. So the yoga of discrimination takes us to a place where we begin to understand the distinction between who we are as a personality and who we are as that which has a personality. When that distinction at the superficial level has begun to happen, then what happens the next stage is in the next chapter of the Gita, the yoga of action. You start applying it. You start practicing it. You start finding ways of repeating the experience of being out of the water. Finding a way of being able to make a distinction between this outer personality and the inner being. So this could be spiritual practices, but it's going to be through the process of inquiry, it's going to be through the process of action, it's going to be through the process of questioning, it's going to be through the process of talking with people, it's going to be through the process of being exposed to people who have a more radiant presence that can actually enhance your ability to experience your own presence. So any of these are under the yoga of action. From action, automatically, without effort, discrimination gets clearer. And of course, you have more periods of dejection. You have more clarity about how bound you are. And then, as action proceeds, that experience begins to build a basis of knowledge. So the action strengthens the discrimination, and the discrimination is in fact knowledge. That ability to experience, to have glimpses, to know that what you are without a personality, without a story, without a mind, without emotions, without the belief, without the memories, without the attachments, that ability to build that sense of who you are outside of that conditioned state of consciousness, which has a signed certificate of expiration, is knowledge. As that knowledge grows, automatically your discrimination grows. Automatically your dejections occur with more clarity, with more sharpness, with more precision. And you get how to refine your actions, and those actions bring more knowledge, and the more knowledge feeds it, so on and so forth. They feed each other. Each feeds the other. When the knowledge comes to a certain point, you also begin to say, I'm not going to do that anymore. You begin to step out of the habit of your old personality, and you begin to say, this doesn't work for me. This isn't what's important to me. It begins to, you lose interest in the childhood toys. You lose interest in the things that kept you entertained in your more immature state of consciousness. Now, concurrent, so renunciation, we can consciously renounce and we can notice how things fall away. The falling away, of course, is a sign of maturation. It's signs of a maturation of these first 4 stages. Things start falling away automatically. The more we consciously renounce, at first it's more difficult. But then after a while, it so reinforces our ability to discriminate, our ability to take right action, and our ability to have a direct experience of ourselves, that we renounce more and more. When all these previous 5 stages reach a certain threshold, next, you find that that which lives you, that which you are in your essence, starts coming forward into the outer personality, causing the outer personality to grow quiet. The experience of the emerging being, or the emerging essence of what we are as consciousness, is always a quieting, making things still, settled, present. We come out of this frantic restlessness of treading the water of our life, our outer life, and we begin to let ourselves sink into that ocean of quietness and stillness that we are, and this is meditation. Meditation in chapter 2 is also addressed called samadhi. Samadhi is simply just another more intense form of meditation. So once what I call natural meditation starts occurring, the forces of that come in while you're meditating start enhancing your effectiveness in all these previous stages. So your ability to move through your dejection, your ability to discriminate, your ability to take right action, your ability to have a direct experience of what you are and what that means, the ability to articulate it, to know it, and this falling away of the patterns of your life that kept you in your outer personality all get enhanced once meditation begins. This is why in my work I put so much emphasis on the meditation, because so much more can be done from bringing the being forward than all these other activities that require process and effort. Meditation takes no time. Although it seems like when you're connected, there's not being connected, and then not being connected again. That seems to occur in time. But the moment of being connected is timeless. The rest of these are in a process. So effectively, all of it's a process, with this piece being perhaps the most effective, this piece being the second most effective, this piece being the third most effective, this piece being the fourth most effective. Discrimination alone, and what we're talking about discrimination is intelligent understanding, often comes last. Some people, they have the discriminating intelligence right at the front, but that discrimination alone is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th most effective means of coming to truth. Understanding it is the 5th, the second to the worst means of coming to the truth of who you are in itself, intellectual understanding, discrimination. Now, of course, there's discriminations of the heart and there's discrimination of the body. Even in kinesiology. What? Kinesiology. You can actually, the body knows when something is true or not true. When it's true, it can resist pressure When it's not true, it's weak. Everything knows at some level in ourselves when we begin to tend to that part of our being. And the body's so simple. The mind is what makes everything so complicated. Okay, so now let's go into the Gita. Chapter 2, first part. There's two key concepts. So we're going to have Satyamai read the verses, and I'll stop her when we get to the first key concept, and then the next set of verses will reveal the second key concept.
Chapter 2, Samkhya Yoga, the Yoga of Discrimination. Sanjaya said, "To whom who was thus overcome by grief, dejected and confused, and whose eyes were filled with tears, Krishna spoke thus. The Blessed Lord said, 'From where come this attachment to you at this hour of peril, Arjuna? It is not for noble souls. It will lead you neither to heaven nor to glory. Yield not to cowardice. It is not befitting of you. Get rid of this faint-heartedness and stand up, you, the scorcher of enemies.'"
So let's hold right there. This is coming down to the relationship between the Krishna to the Arjuna. Arjuna on his own wouldn't have done what he ends up doing in the end of chapter 12. If it wasn't for Krishna, Arjuna would be in the woods somewhere dodging his enemies. Right? So clearly, Krishna was there to bring out what was hidden, what was not clear in Arjuna's nature about what was going on. Arjuna now has just laid out in the previous chapter his perfectly justified rationalization and explanation of why he shouldn't fight. And these are the first words that came out of Krishna. Where did this come from? You're a warrior. What are you talking like some kind of philosopher? Where's this whole thing you've created? He's pushing the consciousness in Arjuna to the surface to question his assumptions so that he won't slip back into dejection. Okay, continue.
Arjuna said, "Krishna, how shall I fight against Bhishma and Drona in this battle? Are they not worthy of my reverence? It is better to live on alms in this world than to kill these noble elders and enjoy all riches and wealth stained by their blood. We do not know which would be better for us. We are also not sure who will win over whom. These very people, the sons of Dhritarashtra, killing whom we will not want to live, are standing before me in the enemy's rank. I am overcome by pity and faint-heartedness. My mind is puzzled. I am unable to know what is my duty. I surrender to thee. I am thy disciple. Please guide me in the correct path."
All right, so this particular last verse, where Arjuna recognizes that he doesn't know what the heck's going on, and he turns to Krishna to guide him. This is the first time he's seeing he has a problem outside of the category of his outer personality. It's a recognition in something inside him that's saying, yes, he's right. It's not so simple. I can't just go into the woods and disappear and be happy with that. Some part of him knows that what he's just rationalized and justified isn't real for him. And when Krishna pointed that out, he's bewildered. He doesn't know what to do next. All his structures for explanation and rationalizing and organizing his life have just collapsed. And he's saying, I don't know what to do. Now, this is a moment of awakening. This is a moment of humility. He's not being arrogant like he was, lead me to the front of the armies and show me with whom I will have to fight. He's saying, oh shit, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. he has reached that third state of knowledge, right? First, you don't know you don't know. Second stage, you think you know, but you don't know. That's where Arjuna was. And the last stage is, and the higher state is, you know you don't know. So he's come to I know I don't know. This is a critical transition point that takes us out of dejection. Prior to that, we resist, we fight, the outer personality still rules. But until we come to that moment of receptivity, of knowing we don't know, nothing will change. We will repeat the same cycle again and again. This inability here in the West to be open to teachings because we're so willful, we're so striving to be independent, we're so striving to do our own way. This acts as a barrier in our outer personality to being able to step outside of ourselves. Now, of course, there's a lot of people who would give us wrong information at that stage. And of course, it takes grace to be able to have the capacity to recognize true advice. Because it's not letting yourself being convinced by somebody. Rather, it's a recognition that what this person is speaking of is true at some part of your being. This is the first surrender in the Bhagavad Gita. This surrendering, just like dejection, is a constant companion, because it's only through the surrendering that we come out of dejection. Dejection ends when we begins its ending, I should say, when we surrender and recognize we know we don't know. In that moment, when we cry out for God, cry out for help, cry out knowing you can no longer do it yourself, that is a surrender. And that brings in forces much larger than ourselves, even if the Guru isn't present, that assists us in making this transition. This is a very key transition. These openings, these shifting of paradigms from the old paradigm to a new paradigm that you don't know yet. You don't know what this new world you're entering into. You don't even know it's a new world. You just know the old doesn't work anymore. That's what you do know.
I am not finding it possible to get rid of this grief, even if I am to get the lordship of this world and that of the gods too. Sanjaya said, O king, after saying this to Sri Krishna, Arjuna, the destroyer of foes, proclaimed, I will not fight, and became silent. Then O Bharata, Sri Krishna, with a smile, spoke the following words to Arjuna, who was full of sorrow. The blessed Lord said, Arjuna, you are speaking like a wise man, but grieve over those who should not be grieved for. Wise men grieve neither for the dead nor for the living. There was never a time when you, I, or these kings ceased to exist, nor shall there ever come a time when we will not exist. Just as the embodied self undergoes the stages of adolescence, youth, and old age, so also it acquires another body. The wise are not deluded about this. Arjuna, the feelings of heat and cold, pleasure and pain, are caused by the contact of senses with the objects of pleasure. These feelings are temporary and recurring in nature. Therefore, endure them calmly. O best among men, the wise men who do not get perturbed with this feeling of pain and pleasure are indeed fit to attain immortality.
Let's hold there. So in this case, Krishna's beginning to teach the Gita. When, verse 57, when Bharata, Sri Krishna, with a smile, spoke the following words to Arjuna, who was full of sorrow, Krishna smiled because Arjuna was ready to receive. He could hear it now. And he began to say what we've said previously. We never cease to exist. We are not that which has an expiration date. We're something other than that. Just as the embodied self undergoes the stages of adolescence, youth, and old age, so it acquires another body. It is just a body. It's just a personality. It's just an ego in which we inhabit for a period of time. And then we drop it. So what is this that inhabits this personality? Who are we if we're not our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, our sense of personal self? When you get a sense of that, of who you are as other than the body, then comes this capacity that's revealed in verse 61, this ability to endure calmly the ups and downs, the moods and the swings, the happy moments, the sad moments, the angers and the sorrows and the regrets. These all are simply temporary feelings, reoccurring in nature. And the art that comes is this ability not to take them so seriously, not to get so lost, take them so personally. Taking it personally and taking it seriously are the same thing, by the way. So all you have to do is where you're identified is look what's serious for you in your life, where your issues are, where your problems are. This is a clue to know where your consciousness is still locked up. So when one begins to experience the authentic truth of themselves, they move towards a true recognition of what they are. And in that, one who do not get perturbed with this feeling of pain and pleasure are indeed fit to attain immortality. That means to attain your true nature. Okay, let's continue from there.
Untruth has no existence, and truth never ceases to exist. The knowers of truth have come to this conclusion after scrutinizing both these maxims. That alone which pervades this universe is indestructible. No one has the power to destroy this imperishable substance. Arjuna, all these bodies are perishable, but not that which dwells in them. Therefore grieve not and fight. One who thinks that it is the slayer, and one who thinks that it can be slain, both are ignorant, because it neither slays nor is it slain. It is never born, nor does it ever die. It comes into embodiment again and again. It is birthless, eternally present, and is not slain when the body is slain.
Just reading these verses can connect you to something. These verses are pointing to truth. They're pointing to the reality that you are actually, that is not dependent on your personality, your body, your story, your memory. This is the magic of the Bhagavad Gita. It's a book that points to truth and how to move into a living relationship with it. This idea that untruth has no existence and truth never ceases to exist. It means, this is the key of the Bhagavad Gita, it says that even this outer personality is not untruth. Even this human identity is not untruth. It's an expression of the one truth, and it has its own validity. That expression is temporary and reoccurring in nature. The other truth, the higher truth, the one that pervades and permeates everything, that truth is eternal and unchanging, even though outwardly it may be endlessly appearing to change. It's concurrent knowledge, this co-knowing of both the passing and the permanent, the unsettled and the settled, the silent and the noisy, the still and the active, concurrently. This is the unique message of the Bhagavad Gita. It is not just pointing to know the unchanging truth alone. It's pointing to knowing it all. But interim, in the first stage of this process of moving ourselves out of our absolute identification in the outer personality, we have to put our attention on that which is eternal. We have to meet it, find it, know it, until it's equal in strength in our own sense of reality as our outer personality. Then we have become who we were always meant to be, which is truth incarnate, consciousness incarnated. Okay?
Arjuna, one who knows the soul to be birthless, imperishable, and eternal, how can he kill anybody, or how can he be the cause for killing? As a person changes worn-out clothes for new ones, so also the soul discards worn-out bodies and takes on new bodies. Neither can weapons cut it, nor can fire burn it. Water cannot drench it, nor can wind dry it. It cannot be cut or burnt, and is incapable of getting wet or dry. It is eternal, all-pervading, constant, and primordial. It is unmanifest, unthinkable, and immutable. Knowing this, you should not grieve. And even if you think that this soul is subject to constant birth and death, you still should not grieve. Whosoever is born shall die, and rebirth is inevitable for the dead. Therefore, you should not grieve over this. Beings are unmanifest before birth and unmanifest after death. They are manifest between these two states. Then what is there to be grieved for? Some see this as a wonder, others speak of it as a wonder, others listen to it in wonder, and there are people who are unable to understand anything, even after hearing about it. Arjuna, the soul that dwells in the bodies of all beings, can never be slain. Therefore, you should not grieve for anyone.
Thank you. All right, so this is the key of discrimination. The key principle of discrimination is to know yourself as the soul. From that vantage point, when you look at your life, you then can see what's really going on. In the normal course of human life, we come to an understanding of what's going on from one part of our personality looking at another part of our personality. Our emotional nature can feel empathetically what's happening in the room, even though our mental doesn't know. Or our mental can understand what's going on with us emotionally, even though the emotions don't know. So within the outer personality, there is a knowledge. This is psychology. Psychology focuses on this. But this knowledge, this knowingness, draws its base from something other than the outer personality. It's not intellectual. That's why it's so difficult to explain. It's so difficult to identify. It is not just a mental knowing. It is a knowing of your whole being that knows what's true and what's not true. When the sense of the soul has come forward in the discrimination, it's as if you're in a magnetic field of attraction and repulsion. Is that you're repulsed by that which is not truth, and you're attracted to that which is truth. And it's this compass, the way a compass is pulled to north. It's this compassing, this sense of what's true, what's real, what's not real, what's untrue, comes to you. And there's this repulsion to that which is not true, and attraction to that which is true. And of course, it's an interim. A relative repulsion and a relative attraction can still be coded very much by the personality. But if you follow that down the road, you'll see that even the personality, through the veils of the personal self, is trying to emerge from this entrapment. And is seeking the positive, it's seeking what it's attracted to as a as the way to come to the thing it truly seeks. Why do we seek comfort? We seek comfort because we can be quieter when we're comfortable. If we're uncomfortable, we're more restless. So comfort is not a wrong thing because it brings us to some aspect, relative aspect, of the silence and stillness of the soul itself. So it's true with pleasure. Pleasure itself, seeking things that are attractive, that we want to have, it's not wrong, it's just a veiled looking for that which brings us the bliss that comes when we're with ourself as truth. It's a veiled truth, a veiled experience of our connection with our higher possibility. This whole dimension is bliss. We separate ourselves from the bliss in the process of figuring out who we are and maneuvering through life and surviving and succeeding. But basically, the underlying current of this physical existence even is bliss. So seeking bliss is actually not wrong in terms of its foundation. Its foundation is it's seeking the happiness of the being. Because when it experiences pleasure, it quiets. When it experiences pleasure, it is a sense of fulfillment. And it's looking for something, but through outer things that are temporary, reoccurring, and only a partial piece of the bliss that exists when we begin to seek truth from the point of view of truth. So finding the means out of this quagmire of partial truths takes time. And unless there is some clear understanding of where you're heading, some capacity to catch the structure of the old habit, to watch yourself being pulled into your outer personality or being pulled into the veil, then you are going to be able to start emerging from this error or partial truth into a wholer and more true, complete truth. The more you know yourself as the eternity, many of the concerns that drive the ego and the separate personality quiet. Because the basic foundation of the ego is it knows it's not going to last. It knows it could die. So the foundation of ego is identification with the outer personality, the outer vehicle. The foundation of truth or being is that which animates, that which lives, that which is. When we live in the truth of who we are, this ability to distinguish ego from being becomes a means to come to peace, a means to come to relaxation, a means to come to quietude and resting, silence, and bliss. So this is how far we'll go today. The idea, the principle of the soul is the key concept. There is this principle of the discrimination is the moment of awakening and recognizing you don't know. And the second key concept is the soul. Understanding these principles is the basis on which the rest of this chapter will then proceed and the rest of the Gita will proceed. The rest of the Gita is how do we know what's true? How do we make that real for us? How do we live from that place? Okay. So now let's finish with a meditation.